Session, building research capacity at tribal colleges and universities and in tribal communities. My name is Kyle Basinski. I am not somebody who has worked hard at building research capacity at tribal colleges, but I can tell you that all of our speakers today are. Let me first introduce our speakers, and then I'll give you sort of the layout of how this forum is going to proceed, and then we'll get started. So this is sort of an experiment for the Native Waters and Arid Lands Tribal Summit. This will be the first time that we have multiple speakers joining us remotely. So one person who's not here today and who was going to lead off, he had to run because we're a little delayed this morning, is Al Kusilikis, and we'll be showing one of Al's slides. Al is the Senior Associate for Strategic Initiatives at AHEC. Also with us today, and if you all will wave when I say your names, people can see you right now. Also with us today is Suzanne Baker, the resource conservationist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Erin Riley, one of our national program leaders for NIFA. Gary Halverson, who's here in person, an environmental science and agriculture instructor at Sitting Bull College. And Virgil Dupuis, who's not on your list, and who is the tribal extension agent for Salish Kootenai College. Is that right? Director of Tribal Extension for Salish Kootenai College. So thank you all so much for being here and being part of this forum. Here's how things are going to proceed. We're actually going to have short presentations from each of our speakers. These are going to be 5-minute lightning style or Ignite style presentations. We're not going to do questions immediately after each presentation. We're just going to move through each of the 4 of them, and then we're going to have an hour and a half of open discussion. I'll be moderating, and I'll lead some questions from the podium up here to sort of generate discussion. But we also want to invite all of you to participate. If you've got a question for the speakers that's following on in the conversation, you're welcome to raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you. Or if you want to use our fancy Slido tool, you are very welcome to do that. Just open a browser on your phone or computer, type in sli.do, and our meeting tag, which is NWAL 2018. And then you can actually type your question right into the screen here, and we will ask those as the conversation progresses. So you can join the conversation in multiple ways. So without further ado, and what I'm going to be doing is sharing our screen here with our participants remotely. So you'll just have to bear with me as I pull people's screens up. This is Al's first slide, and Al is unfortunately not able to be with us this morning, but he gave us permission to briefly introduce his talk because it really helps frame the discussion for the rest of our session today. So the question of our session is how to grow the tribal research ecosystem in tribal colleges, and then also in nations, on reservations where there aren't tribal colleges. How do we expand research opportunities and impacts for all Native communities across the West? So here's the problem. There's a need for adaptation planning and implementation that is greater than what is available to all tribal communities. We've got a need that's a reach for us. So what are some strategies that we might approach this problem with? One, and we talked about this a bit before while y'all were in the other session, is the notion of collective impact intervention. And this is the idea that it can be very impactful to organize all stakeholders and resources around specific issues. So it's very targeted interventions. and that these interventions would focus on local resources and engage community members at all levels of, say, the education chain, so K through 12 or K through 16, including the tribal college systems. The second model and strategy that we might use is to build inquiry-based learning products or projects around local climate and environment issues. So this is an example of one of those specific issues that we can organize around and have interventions or have programming that is engaging students at all levels of education. A third is to leverage our national climate science resources, data, and expertise to provide scaffolding for local efforts. And that's it's been one of the goals of the Native Waters and Arid Lands Project, and it's a goal that's shared among many of the different speakers that we'll hear today. And then the fourth is to use design-based research and participatory design to continually improve community-based knowledge-building processes. So I was wondering, can any of our speakers who are joining us remotely speak to, does anybody want to speak to any of the four of these? Did we lose everyone?
I'm still here.
Oh, I can hear you. Note that most of you are muted right now. So if you were talking and we didn't hear any of you. But hi, Suzanne.
Hello.
Hello. Do you have something that you want to add to that?
I do not. I was just letting you know that we were still here.
Okay, thank you. All right, well then, that sort of frames where we're going to go with our discussion today, and I'd like to move on to our first speaker, who is going to be Suzanne Baker. And Suzanne, let me get your slides up and running real quick. All right, Suzanne. Oh, sorry, I pulled up the old one. All right, Suzanne, do you see your slide?
I can. Thank you.
Great. So you just tell me to progress, and I will, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to address you today. And I'll be talking about two items, a tribal weather station project, and also the Site Materials Center program by NRCS. These two projects or programs create a great foundation for research, and that is what I will be speaking today about. So underneath my name, there's a number of hats with which I wear. The resource conservationist, I'm also the acting tribal liaison for New York, and also the Northeast Regional Tribal Liaison for NRCS. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Oh. I've progressed to the next one. Can you see it?
I cannot, but I can still speak over it.
Okay, I'm on the Tribal Soil Climate Analysis Network, the one with the weather station.
Okay, great. I can't really see that, but so the Tribal Soil Climate Analysis Network, or TSCAN, is what we're referring to, measures a number of parameters. There's the soil moisture and temperature, air temperature, relative humidity, soil radiation, which is basically cloud cover, precipitation, wind speed, direction, and lake wetness. The project I initiated in 2017 during a year-long detail to the Northeast Climate Hub. The TSCAN network is a subset of NRCS's SCAN network out of the Oregon office. And the SCAN network actually started in the early 90s. Next slide, please.
All right.
So this slide is a map of the U.S., and there are actually over 200 active SCAN stations. And they are collecting data every hour, 24/7. And to this 200 units, we will be adding the subset of approximately 30 T-SCAN units. And right now, there are 5 that have been installed, and that's in California, South Dakota, Rhode Island, Virginia, and New York. Next slide.
All right.
This project can be separated into 2 phases. The phase 1 are the units themselves, which are the weather stations. And I worked with our SCAN team in Portland, Oregon to design these units for us, with all the different parameters that we wanted to be measured. And they also provided the training on site in California, South Dakota, and in September it was at the Pamunkey Tribe in Virginia, where we had 8 tribes in attendance, learning how to install these units and also maintenance. The phase 2 of the project is the online platform that will be available to everybody. I'm working directly with the Northeast Climate Center, which is out of the Cornell University, and they're developing an online platform that will take all the data from the T-SCAN and SCAN units all the way back to the early 1990s and be able to use a number of tools to look at this data. There is growing degree days, there is water deficit, heat stress for livestock, and also there's going to be a graphing and tabular tool that will be supporting STEM education, and we will be working with different cohorts, a group of individuals that are tribal producers, to talk about further development of additional tools. And also, I'd like to get a group of youth and their mentors and or teachers together to have discussions about the units, about how they're using them, and potential curriculum development. Next slide, please.
All right.
The next program I'd like to speak about is NRCS's Plant Materials Center. These centers, there's 25 scattered across the U.S., and these centers serve as training centers. They have seed cleaning equipment. They have the ability to store seeds in cold storage for you, provide propagation support. They can serve as a template. You can walk around the facility and talk to the professionals there that if you want to start a tribal nursery, they're there for support. And I'm also center closest to me is in New York, and I put out emails asking folks if they want some sweetgrass sent to their tribe so they can initiate and establish this plant in their area, and I have quite a list that's grown. When I worked with Mashpee Wampanoag and Wampanoag Tribe of Gayhead in Massachusetts, I used the Plant Materials Center in Cape May. Cape May specializes in shoreline restoration, so they have the stock of plants and ability to identify a lot of shoreline species. When I worked with the tribes in Massachusetts, we used the Plant Materials Center staff and helped us to identify different areas that needed restoration. Next slide, please.
All right.
And this side is the actual location, so you'll be able to identify which Plant Materials Center is closest to you for your access. And last slide.
Okay.
This slide has the contact and some links. So if you have any questions on either of my presentations and the T-Scan project itself, you can reach out to me. If there is a tribal nation that is interested in acquiring one of the T-Scans, we may have some that are still not spoken for. You can reach out directly to Barry Hamilton at headquarters. And then there's the website for T-Scan and also the website for the Plant Materials Center. Can I get another slide?
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, so our next speaker is Erin Riley, from the National Program Leader for NIFA. And Erin, let me pull your talk up.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great.
So how many people are there? I'm curious in the room.
Oh, that's a good question. I should have said. We've got
300.
we've got hundreds and hundreds at the summit, and we've got approximately 40 people, 30 or 40 people, 30 people in the room right now.
Oh, great. Okay, well,
Yeah.
welcome. So I'm Erin Riley, and the National Program Leader for the Tribal Programs at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And so I just started out with this slide. This was a recent visit, actually last week, that we took to the Choctaw Nation and visited one of their greenhouses, which was funded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. You can see some of their giant tobacco plants, which was a really neat thing to see that they were growing, as well as some other traditional plants in that greenhouse. That greenhouse was self-watering. It was really a high-tech greenhouse and neat to see. So go ahead to the first slide. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the tribal programs here at NIFA. And so I'm going to start with the 1994 capacity grants. So these grants are not competitive, but we do go through them internally, and that's our equity and extension grants. So the equity is to support faculty who develop classes and degree programs that teach science, math to students, and the program focuses on agriculture, natural resources, and social sciences. That particular program has a funding rate currently of $3,439,000. The other capacity grant is the 1994 Tribal College Extension Program. And that program allows for tribal colleges to create extension offices for their reservation communities. So each extension office is supposed to work for the community to build programs that target local needs, such as entrepreneurship, agriculture, and that particular program with the special emphasis program I'll talk about here is at $6,262,160 currently. They just recently, Extension recently received a $2 million increase, which we were very excited about. And then there are the 1994 competitive grant programs. There's the Extension Special Emphasis Program, which helps to emphasize certain extension projects that are occurring at the tribal college, and people apply and compete for these particular programs. There's also the Tribal College Research Program, which is currently at about $3 million, that received a increase this year as well. The tribal colleges received an endowment where Congress has put money into the endowment each year since 1994, and they receive the interest, which is divided in a ratio in terms of student numbers, as well as between the colleges evenly. There's a ratio that they use for the tribal college endowment. The other program that is in the NIFA tribal programs is the federally recognized Tribal Extension Program, which this money goes to the 1862 land-grant universities, and it funds a extension agent on. We currently have 36 extension agents that are located on reservation communities. So next slide. I can't see the slides on my end,
Oh,
so.
sorry. Yep, we're on agroecology stewardship.
Great. Okay. So the agroecology, I wanted. They asked me to go over some of the projects that are going on, so I just highlighted a couple of them. And Virgil is in the room, so I'm going to talk about one of yours here in a second as well. But the agroecology stewardship and community engagement project that United Tribes Technical College put on. This was an extension grant, and what it did is it worked to expand its outreach through various initiatives and projects. One of the projects was a children's garden project, and it also, that particular project expanded to a community garden program that included orchard crops and Hascat plant berries. They made raised beds and had plants specifically for herb gardens, and they designed this for people who were impaired mobily, so that people with these impairments were able to be gardeners. They were able to raise home gardens, and they put them up so that people who had impairments didn't have to dig or bend over. They could utilize these gardens standing. They also did multiple workshops that utilized the garden's produce with fresh recipes, and they continued efforts to combine traditional knowledge and Western science. In the Arikara garden, they also did a medicine wheel garden and other indigenous plants in a dragonfly garden that they made. So another project is the Salish Kootenai College Sustainable Initiative Project, which was funded out of the research program, the 1994 research program, where Salish Kootenai adopted a path to transition to a more sustainable campus. So they assisted in adopting sustainable practices through their programs, and they involved over 200 students in this. They created a Go Green committee. They had a faculty advisor, which maybe Virgil was the faculty advisor, I don't know. And then they set up recycling bins, cardboard boxes, aluminum recycling, e-waste, and really try to encourage students and the campus to be more environmentally sound. Next slide. So two other programs that we have are the FERTEP, the Federally Recognized Tribal Extension Program, and the Equity Program that I'll just talk about. So the Good Life, and I'll talk about that program at the University of Minnesota in more of a story. So there was a young boy about age 11 who was juggling food and prizes at this particular workshop that the FERTEP educator held, and he was walking home, and the FERTEP agent asked how far the boy had to walk because it was raining. And it was discovered that he had to walk 3 miles to attend, and his mother was working, so she couldn't participate. So he was given a ride home and told the FERTEP educator how excited he was to use the food he had made from his family dinner. He said, "Look what I have won." And he showed 2 pot holders with matching dish towels and rags. He said, "My mom has always wanted these. She's going to be so happy, and look at all this food I have. Now I know how to cook. And now I know I can go get apples there anytime I'm hungry. This was just the best day." This event was made possible through a shared gift grant, as well as through the Federally Recognized Tribal Extension Program. This is kind of a little bit different in terms of just a story about how some of these programs affect students and the youth, especially in these particular communities. And then the last program I'm going to share is our Equity Program, which is our education program, and this was from Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, and it was increasing the capacity of the Fond du Lac Tribal Community College to offer STEM programming and sustainability. So Fond du Lac provided hand-on practical application experience to over 87 students in different sections of environmental science, alternative energy, environmental ethics, geospatial technologies, and biology. They produced over 20 research posters, air quality research, extended growing seasons to solar and passive heat-powered greenhouses, as well as community outreach through events, networks, presentations. All of this research resulted in projects that would create a campus that encouraged STEM learning and models for sustainability on their campus. So these are just some examples of different projects from the tribal programs, and it kind of gives you an idea of the array of things that these different 1994 institutions, as well as the FERTEP agents, and the different people that they're affecting with the work that they are doing through these grants.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin, for your presentation and for being here. I'm sure people will have a lot of questions for you as we move into discussion. All right, our next speaker is Gary Halverson, from an environmental science and agricultural instructor at Sitting Bull College. And here, Gary, I'll get it set up and then you can use this.
Is the mic on? Yeah, I can hear it. Okay, title of my presentation is Research and Education at Sitting Bull College. That's covers a lot of ground, but I'm going to talk especially about the research that we do in the environmental science program and the environmental science program, the degree programs that we have there. Just to know, so you know where Standing Rock is. Here's a map of Standing Rock Reservation. This is the North Dakota, South Dakota boundary here, and it's approximately in the middle of the state, and then the Missouri River runs down the east side of the reservation. And for those of you who might be interested, the pipeline protesters, the DAPL, the pipeline was supposed to go across the Missouri River right up here, and right above the top of the reservation is where the pipeline protesters had their encampment. Okay. We do have environmental science degrees. We offer an AS and a BS degree in environmental science. And in 2014, the Higher Learning Commission approved an MS degree for us. And the first cohort started in the fall of 2014. We're now going into our third cohort of students. Undergraduate research is required to complete an AS and BS degree in environmental science, so we have a lot of practice working with research projects with undergraduates. We have a faculty of 5 or 6 PhD level faculty in the department, so we have some good research background to draw from. Having said that, the master's degree requires graduate level research, which is a jump up from undergraduate research, and we're kind of coming to grips with that right now, knowing that we have to increase our research capacity and the level of research that we're doing. We do have an analytical lab certified by EPA to analyze drinking water samples. And here's just some pictures of some of the research that we do. These were actually with high school students. Here's Selena painting a prairie dog so that when we let the prairie dog go, we could put actually a number on him so that we can, with binoculars, figure out which prairie dog is going where and doing what. So this is kind of a fun project for them. Oops, let's see.
Looks like a target to me.
And here are 2 students, 2 of our students who are captured some turtles, and they're doing some measurements on those turtles. Okay, I'm going to go back to that one. Here, I got it. Girl on the right actually ended up going to Notre Dame and got an engineering degree in 4 years, and last I heard, she was working on a master's degree at Tufts University in New Jersey. So, okay, back to the analytical chemistry lab. That's kind of my baby a little bit, and we got funding from DoD for much of the equipment, Department of the Navy and Department of the Army. We're certified by EPA to analyze drinking water samples. It's used for our student research, so in the past they always have to send their samples off someplace else to get them analyzed, but now they can do much of the analysis right in our lab. Provides jobs for students, and at all levels. We have full-time technicians, part-time technicians, and some people just come in and work a little bit. Tribal college training, we actually have had people from other tribal colleges come in and get trained on the equipment. So we're continuing to do that as it becomes available, and we've used it for community training. We one time had all the teachers in Standing Rock, and they're spending 2 days on analytical chemistry, which was kind of an amazing feat for us to go through. I use all my students to help these teachers do some of the analytical techniques. And we also serve as a service lab for Standing Rock community. The Water Resources Department has a 106 program through EPA, which is gathering environmental samples throughout the year, and we do the analysis for them on that program. And then we work with other tribal communities too, doing analysis for them or working on building their capacity on analytical chemistry types of things. Okay. Here's one of our former technicians in the lab. And for our graduate program, MS degree program, we have a cohort of students that they get all the instruction together. They go through as a cohort because we aren't a big enough institution for everybody to decide on a different program. And we've been going with water quality, and so using the lab works well on that. Students have actually ended up looking at mercury and lead concentrations in river sediments. It's been a learning curve for both them and us. We've been doing a lot of method development, especially in the mercury and lead, and some of the things that other people have had to deal with are the volatility of those elements, and whether you analyze using dry samples or wet samples. And so we had to go through all of that kind of method development for ourselves. Here's one of our former grad students collecting samples, sediment samples in the Grand River. And here's Bruz taking those samples up and cooling them in a cooler to bring them back to the lab. And see, that may be the last one I've got. So that's all I have to present right now. We'll have some questions later.
Thank you, Gary. Our last speaker this morning will be Virgil Dupuis, who's the Director of Tribal Extension at Salish Kootenai College.
Thank you. I just want to express my appreciation for being allowed to come in and participate with you. It's always good to get out of home and see how other people are doing things and see the progress that you're making. I would especially take back a comment I made a few days ago about the lack of TK and Western science. We don't have it in our area, and the work that the Dene Water people are doing is really cutting edge, and I appreciate that. I'm going to talk about kind of a structural piece of how we've developed research capacity at SKC through an extension-led process. I focus on local topics that also have regional relevance. The regional relevance, it brings in other partners. It's good for the funders. The funders like to see you reach out beyond your own surroundings to see what the regional impact is. And that has helped us tremendously. I seek tribal concurrence, and participation in all my projects. I go to the tribal council, I go to the elders, I'll go to the community, and they get a sense of understanding, and then they support the projects going up. I work with the tribal programs on the research, implementation. I make sure the lands department knows what we're doing. We get their concurrence. We work with the lessees who are on those properties, and we work with participants in some of the food programs. These are community-driven issues. My view of extension, I say extension-led, and these are extension-led projects. My view of extension is probably a little different than the systems. Tribal colleges are not part of the cooperative extension system. You've heard that. That's an 1862, 1890, 1964 club. We come through extension with a whole other creation, different congressional background, different funding streams, different responsibilities. So I feel I have a little bit of freedom in defining what extension is. The system will say extension is the university's portal to the community. I look at it as the community's portal to university. So I look at it opposite. And that causes me some problems sometimes. Getting started, you just need good ideas with good scientific merit. We are in a competitive world. The peer panel that looks at it is like a rodeo. You don't know the quality of the stock. You don't know the quality of the other opponents. You don't know the quality of the judges. So it is a rodeo, okay? You develop partnerships, and that's what the regional aspect of my work does. I go out and seek researchers. I'm a generalist, I'm not a specialist. So I go out and find people that can do the work that I need specialists for. And building that regional partnership really helps. If they know you're working on a similar topic, though you live 600 miles away, they're more apt to work with you. Grantsmanship, we have to have grantsmanship. Either if you have grant writers or you yourself have to do it, you have to figure out how to crack that nut of writing good grants. Then of course you need facilities, equipment, and people. So you need all that before you can get to work doing research. Implementation, all of my research projects have extension components. I write that right in there so that as I shift my extension grant is a single function grant. It says extension, it doesn't say integrated. So technically, I'm not really supposed to be doing research on a single function grant, correct? So I shift my duties over to these research projects, being the extension piece of these research projects that work back into the community. And they have human dimension elements. I make sure that every one of our research projects are addressing a human-related issue or environmental-related issue that people are a part of. It's not my research, in other words. You'll never hear me say, my research is this. It's our research. And they all have climate change implications. This isn't by design. It's just kind of how it happened. But they all do have mitigation measures geared at adaptive management, adaptive changes in people to try to address these climate changes when they come. Where is this? Whoops. Our extension research programs kind of revolve around just these three simple topics. I'm personally into invasive species. I've been doing that for 35 years. So I'm working with aquatic invasive plants, annual invasive plants, and then food sovereignty, since I do have an agricultural background. I'm a former farmer. I had to get out of the business. I wasn't making any money. I'm getting older, so I went into education. But that's basically the wheel that we follow. I'm not going to go through all this, but when we take on a project, we try to answer these questions. Why are they important? With annual invasive grasses, I know you have the annual invasive grasses down here. They're taking over our rangelands in extremely rapid progression. We have three major ones. They're destroying agricultural productivity, conservation values, wildlife issues. They're a big deal for us. They're altering fire regimes. Ongoing research, we have 3 research projects going on with annual invasive grasses right now with multiple partners. We have extension programs. I'm securing funding for weed management groups. We're having developing containment and management strategies with farmers and ranchers and the tribes. We do monitoring and mapping. And some of these things aren't really extension activities, are they? They're more service orientated. But if we weren't doing that, the tribes, the local feed boards don't have the people to do that kind of work. So we take it on as an extension project. And then we have to document our impacts in the climate changes that are going on over there that are affecting climate. We also acknowledge those. With aquatic invasive plants, I've been working on this for about 10 years on one particular plant in Flathead Lake that is now in the Columbia River system. We're working with 4 states, 2 provinces. This is also a problem in the Northeast, but I'm just working in the Pacific Northwest. There's other issues. Environmental impacts, water quality degradation. We're changing open water environments into closed water environments. That has big impacts on native fish, invasive fish. There's food chain implications that are going on. There's degradation of water. There's economic issues going on where land values are being degraded due to this plant. Recreational values are going down. Irrigation water is being hindered in the delivery as it infests ditches. So there's many, many issues going on there, and we did develop a biological control program, which I'm just part of on the fringe. We're working with Washington State University, who's working with international partners, but I'm involved in the fundraising for that. So it's a kind of a continual thing that we're working together. University of Montana, Washington State, and some other states downstream are all collaborating, trying to keep this biological control project going. So far, we've isolated 1 agent. We're getting close to ready to do a tag petition on. So that's in the works. That's coming down. We're going to start working on some other biocontrols as well. That's a 15-year project in itself. We've documented lots of impacts. We're making some progress in that area. And then the climate implications are over there as well. Improving health outcomes for participants in food supplement programs. This is an issue with all tribal communities. There's a lot of chronic disease related to diet-related illnesses. Food security is on the increase in our area. We're seeing increases in the use of the commodity program, the SNAP program annually. Even with a booming economy, supposedly it's not filtering down into the tribal communities. We're getting more people on food supplement programs. So we have ongoing research. We're doing nutrition interventions. We're doing healthy food preparation. We're doing community gardening and a variety of things like that. The climate change implications in this are more direct, I think. We're trying to improve the local food system. We're trying to improve the agricultural economy, bring some diversity into it. And we want to utilize tribal land and water to start feeding the people. This is kind of my version of taking Aldo Leopold's Sustainable Ag Center philosophy on what a food system looks like. And of course, they have it in a column. Wow, that'd be a great little medicine wheel, really. Health and wealth balance. Wealth not being rich, but wealth being having the land and water resources to support yourself. And then the difference between community and individual balance. I'm not a super fan of Aldo Leopold. He's pretty hard on the land grant system after all, but that's kind of what a food system probably should be looking like. I don't know that our current ag system really looks that way. We're pretty distant from it. A lot of people in the cities have no idea how food is produced, where it comes from. They don't know if their vegetables are coming from Mexico or South America or right across the road. They don't know where they come from. My support, I try to broaden it out. I'm heavily dependent on USDA NIFA for my extension phase. We utilize the Tribal College Research Program heavily. But beyond that, we're working with NIH, the INBRI programs. You have INBRI in Nevada and in Mexico. They just added, in Montana, they added food sovereignty as one of their objectives. And this is a biomedical research group. And typically they're bench chemists, they're geneticists, they're people that develop medicines, and they look at reactions within on the cellular level. But they are moving into food sovereignty. And I don't know if they're doing it in Nevada and in Mexico, but if you get involved with them, start communicating with them, they may very well be they're very good people to work with. They're very excited in Montana. I think there's 5 tribal colleges now working with them in Montana through Montana State University. We're also securing funding from the state of Montana on invasives. We work really closely with them. Army Corps of Engineers and the Forest Service is starting to help us as well. I'm looking for additional partners, NSF. I'm thinking about jumping into that, but learning a whole other agency is, it's going to be trying. But they have a lot of support, NSF does. Some of the challenges, you have to build support within your tribal governments. That can be hard to do, and it can be easy to do. Some tribal colleges don't communicate very much with their tribal governments, and I don't know why that is. It can be challenging, but I encourage you to do that. Support with your own institution. I was talking to our strategic planner a few weeks ago, and I was asking questions in a session, and she came up to me, she says, oh, they're not going to make you do a strategic plan because you don't do anything with students. It about floored me. I said, I got 7 students over there in my lab right now. I got 3 of them completing their bachelor's thesis projects. I paid $70,000 out in student stipends this year, and you say I don't do anything with students? And so by then she turned around and was walking down the hall. So I chased her down the hall. And I told her, I'm going to do one anyway. I don't care if they don't want one or not. I have to tell them what I'm doing. So I fell asleep in telling my leadership what I was doing. They just said, oh, here's Virgil out here in his little orbit doing things. He's working with the community, but we work with students. And that tells me our school is pulled away from our community. So hopefully they'll take that as a lead and get back into our community. And it's just true. A personnel development and succession plan. This kind of a system is not going to hold up itself. When I go away, it'll crash in about a year. I'm quite sure of it. So I'm trying to get the resources so I can bring in younger people who are interested in this, who are willing to hang in there for a while before they can take full reins. I'm giving people right now a lot more authority and responsibility than they'd ever had before. In some ways that's not fair to them, but somebody has to do this because this system I think is worth keeping, but it's pretty thin as far as sustainability because we don't have any formula funds to operate on. We don't have a way to maintain that. I'm going to continually broaden my partnership roles, my friends that we develop out there. This is a great way to do it. Evaluation. Kyle wanted me to mention, yes, we need evaluation. How's that? We don't do a good enough job. We don't have evaluators in our area. I can't find them, and when you do, they want $1,000 a day. It's pretty expensive. But I'm more interested in program-wide evaluations, more community impact evaluation, and tying that to marketing. Clearly, we have to market our products where it's a competitive field out there. We have to let people know what we're doing, and so I'm adopting some social media attempts. I'm kicking and screaming going into that. I don't want to do Facebook. I don't want to do Instagram, but it works. It really does. So I have people coming in to help me with that. Scholarships and grants. There is a lot of support for Native students out there if you go after it. There is a lot. American Indian College Fund, the American Graduate Fund, agency fund, grants. NIH has a tremendous amount of funding for students. Look, where'd we go? I think I was done.
We'll come back in a second.
And then some kind of a multi-institutional, multidisciplinary tribal climate, human dimension capacity initiatives. I don't know how you put that into a real buzzword, but we should start working better together. The tribal colleges don't work together very well. They really don't. I've had some successes, but we all get absorbed into keeping our own institution stable, and that's enough of a challenge itself. But we really need to work a little bit closer together if we can. So that's all I got.
Thank you very much, Virgil. Let me stop sharing our screen and get our speakers back up on the screen here. And you know, if our speakers are comfortable coming back on video, you'll show up on the screen in a moment. There we are. All right, so I want to kick off our discussion. Thank you all again for. Hold on, we're having technical difficulties here. There you are. Oh my gosh. There we Thank you all again for your presentations. I want to start off our discussion. Virgil, at the end of his presentation, gave us a real sense of how he views expanding research capacity. We've heard some examples of what might be construed as expanding research capacity at tribal colleges through expanding student research, for example, or through grant making. But I was wondering if each of you could just take a minute and tell us what research capacity means to you. Try and define it, and then what does it mean to expand that capacity in the context of tribal colleges and universities? And Suzanne, we'll start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. NRCS, the agency that I work for, traditionally they don't conduct research, although there are the Plant Materials Center and the TSCAM project are both great foundations for research efforts. So for our agency, I think that we provide support with which those will draw information to supplement their research.
So expanding research capacity for the NRCS is expanding those support structures for conducting research on tribal land and at TCUs. Is that a good summary of what you said?
I'm sorry, did you ask something?
Yeah. So expanding research capacity in the eyes of NRCS is the support services that the Natural Resource Conservation Service provide to producers and soil scientists on tribal land and at TCUs. Great, thank you. Erin, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess here we talk about it quite a bit, kind of what it is, and so I guess the way that we define it is really how a school, kind of its maximum capacity currently for research and how they can build upon that maximum capacity. And I think Virgil hit on it, a lot of what he talked about in terms of partnerships with other tribal colleges, partnerships with people within the community, and really being able to sustain some of the science projects they're doing, such as Gary's doing with his water lab, but then build on that to really build out the programs in their school into things that are what the stakeholder needs, so what the community needs, and then really trying to make the school kind of build that capacity within the college. So that's really how we view it.
And like what Al was saying in his first slide that we started this off with, it really has to do with integrating multiple groups across the sort of stakeholders, multiple stakeholder groups. And what we're talking about in this conversation seems to be focusing on expanding research capacity within the tribal colleges themselves. But if those programs launch and aren't able to be sustained within communities that they're designed to serve and enhance, then that becomes a problem. And I think that might be a point of discussion for us to launch off on. Gary, you gave us a nice picture of expanded research opportunities for undergraduates, but I was hoping you would be able to speak on what research capacity means for you in the context of Sitting Bull College.
Yeah, first I brought along our newest graduate student in our master's degree program, Saul Bobtail-Bear, right here, and I encourage you to talk to him, introduce yourself. He's a real good guy to talk to. But yeah, we've got the lab and some laboratory facilities, but as we move into this master's degree program, it's become more difficult. We're finding difficulties with the level of research that we're doing, and I know I've tried to get grant money, and they come back and tell me that we aren't doing, what's the word now? We're not doing really high-level research.
Cutting edge.
Transformative research. And I tried to make the case that the research we were doing was transformative for Standing Rock, but maybe not for the world, but nobody bought that idea at all. So we're looking at getting into some areas that will help us to transform the research. Particularly right now, we're looking at getting more into genetics and genomics that relate to a lot of environmental stuff in a way that I think should be transformative. There are some just kind of housekeeping things that we're finding really difficult to get through, and that is that we are all basically educational institutions, the tribal colleges are, and most of the people who do research do that on top of their job rather than part of their job, and that just doesn't work, especially for us when we're looking at getting into more transformative research. We're going to require more lab space, more building space, room for graduate student offices, and so on. And so we just have to have that release time to do the research. And our administration will say, well, we have trouble getting faculty into tribal colleges anyway, now you want to give them release time, so that means we got to get more faculty in. But they're the ones who really wanted the graduate program, so if they really want the graduate program and want it to work, they're going to have to give us some release time to do research. It's just, I don't see any other way around it. So that's kind of one of the issues that we're looking at. And you talked about sustainability. Another thing that has been an issue for us, or for me in particular, is that when I get students trained in the lab to the point where they're really good at it, they become a real hot commodity on the open market. And all of the grad students we've had so far have had jobs before they even graduated, waiting for them. And in spite of my begging for higher salaries for them to keep some of them there, they're getting offered 2 to 3 times what I can pay them, So I'm looking at big turnover in people, and Saul is my current technician in the lab, and he's locked in for 2 years since he's in the grad program, but he wants to get a PhD. So if anybody wants to talk to him about that, he'd be a good candidate for that too. But so how do I sustain this program? I had a part-time employee this summer, and he got trained in on quite a bit of the equipment, and summer came to an end, and so he was looking for a job, and he interviewed for the job, and the lady told him, well, we've got 3 more candidates to interview, so we'll let you know. And so as he was walking out, the lady came running after him and said, we've changed our mind, we want you, we're going to hire you right now. So that's the kind of thing I'm facing in terms of developing and maintaining a program, or one of the issues that comes up anyways.
And are these students, are these highly successful students being recruited by businesses on the reservation, or are they being recruited to, I don't know where, outside?
One of the grad students went with a consulting company out of Houston, Texas. He does a lot of work in the oil fields, so he comes up to visit us in North Dakota occasionally. Another one took a job with NRCS, just a few miles away, so he's still on Standing Rock. And the graduate student we had just now, he's White Mountain Apache, and he got a job on his reservation going home. So I guess that's not a large sample, but it gives you an idea that some of them are staying on Standing Rock or going to their home places, but they can also get jobs outside of that. And one of the grad students, the one that went to Houston, I got to tell you this story, but somebody else offered him a job because they saw how good he was, and God gave him a big salary increase, so he went to his boss and said, you know, I got this chance for this big increase, and so I'm gonna take this other job. And his boss looked at him and said, I'll match that guy's salary and give you an additional $10,000 a year on top of that. So they're really doing well right now. So we're really excited about that.
Does Standing Rock have, I don't know much about that tribe. Do they have natural resource managers that, or natural resource management offices that your students are flowing into, or other, non-federal necessarily offices?
Yeah, and so we have like a tribal EPA, tribal water resources, game and fish, and that sort of thing. So they are flowing in and taking a lot of those jobs, and there's a little bit of concern about whether we've got enough jobs for everybody, but we did a study of not only the counties on Standing Rock, but the counties, adjacent counties all the way around Standing Rock. And if you included those, there's quite a few jobs available for them, so I think we'll be okay for a while.
Thank you. Virgil, do you have anything to add to your comments earlier, or based on what we've heard so far?
On capacity building, it's just an ongoing, continual effort. I don't have the answer of how we're going to continue ours. It'd be nice to develop an endowment somewhere and live off, at least chairs and positions, but that doesn't really happen at tribal colleges. So it's just going to be an ongoing chase. I'd like to develop better relationships with the natural resource faculty and with some of the health and wellness faculty to see what they would like to draw from our community research into their classes. And we can do guest lectures and stuff like that. I don't think those are good to do. I don't know that it really benefits the students in the long run that much. I would like to get them out into the community doing helping with some of the research we're doing in class type activities. I think that'd be a plus. I'd also like to engage faculty into actually doing some research with them. We have some high qualified faculty, and that hasn't been very successful for me. So I'm going outside to institutions to get genetics assistance, to get chemistry assistance, to get ecology assistance, and some economics as well. So I don't know that the school has the capacity to really support that. And the differences in tribal colleges versus a research situation in 1862, for example, an extension person for an 1862 has all this research capacity right down the road to draw from. Now, Montana State's pretty generous with me. They know I'm not part of their system, but they will assist me when I ask for help. I don't pay them, and that works out pretty well. I don't get the steady kind of assistance I need, but it works on specialist type of requests. They like to come in and they do like participating as an advisory board member on research, for example, and that helps a lot. They give technical experience, expertise, and a lot of these people are double appointees. They got extension and research appointments. We don't have that luxury to draw from, so we have to create that knowledge base in other ways. I like having that expertise handy, but it's hard to access sometimes for tribal colleges. That's why Gary's talking about developing all that expertise internally is impossible.
So those partnerships have been productive for particular research projects or particular projects that you have, but do you feel like they've actually enhanced the capacity internally at the tribal college or on the reservation, or are we stuck in this loop of always having those, depending on those partnerships in order to?
It's a loop. Yeah, it isn't building a sustainable thing at the campus. It's not lasting there. It lasts with the students that are there. If they become, researchers for me or office assistants, that sort of thing, it helps with them. But again, that's pretty much all soft money. It's hard to retain people under conditions when they know you're living on soft money. I've been pretty successful where I haven't ever ran out of money in 20 years, but it's a problem, and nobody's ever given me a way to how to address that. And I don't teach, and that's one advantage, quite frankly. If I had to teach on top of doing all these other activities plus administration, it wouldn't be possible. I find I've been administering, I think I have to administrate 2 or 3 times a week in days a week. It's not a simple process with tribal colleges. We grind it really fine when it comes to administration, believe me. It's a challenge.
So we're seeing problems of sustainability in the sense of students who have been trained not being retained in the tribal college system, or sometimes even in the tribe or on the reservation, and then also problems of sustainability where we don't have where we're not having capacity building in situ, in place in the tribal colleges. We're building capacity for particular projects, perhaps through partnerships, but those may be somewhat transient if faculty aren't developing new skills. Aaron, I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about NIFA's programs, and if they're trying to target either of those two sort of barriers to sustainable capacity building within research at TCUs and within tribes. Oh, you're muted. Oh, wait, Aaron, I think you're muted.
Probably can't hear you.
Go.
There you are.
Good, go on and on. That's an ongoing discussion that we have here. Are actually, how do you target these particular issues that Virgil was discussing? And they're difficult issues to tackle. I mean, some of the things that we've thrown around is putting in more funding for the budget offices to try to get them so that they have more training for their workforces. I know that there are some other agencies that are working on trying to match salaries to, within the tribal colleges to those that would be comparable at other institutions. But, that you run into problems at these particular schools because they have caps on what they can pay. And so it's really difficult to kind of figure out some of those challenges and how do you get the tribal colleges as organizations to and the administration to kind of get on board with a lot of these issues. They were originally set up as teaching institutions. So one of the things that we discussed is trying to get more feedback in terms of the RFAs so that they're a little bit, right now they're kind of modeled out of Western science, but so that they're modeled more around communities, tribal communities, and maybe that would help. So it's definitely a beast. We talk about it quite a bit, and input is always welcome here.
What do you think has been the most, you gave us examples of all the different tribal programs within NIFA's portfolio. What have been the most successful ones, in your opinion, at expanding research capacity in a sustainable way?
Well, I think actually 2 people that are sitting there, Sitting Bull has done a really, really good job with their I was surprised to hear Gary say that about his water program, but with his water program and also their bison project. And Salish Kootenai has been extremely successful as well. United Tribes Technical College has been very successful in doing different kinds of projects and sustaining those projects. But even some of the best schools, once you get one person that's done an exceptional job retired, that institutional knowledge leaves and it creates huge gaps sometimes for years in these colleges. And trying to tackle that in such small institutions in general, I think is going to be very difficult. And that's where I think the more that they're ingrained in the community and have that community support, the they will be in the future.
So yeah, sure, Virgil.
There's different structures with how different colleges utilize their land grant funding. And is Benita out there? You want to say something about how you guys are structured? Because it is different than how many of us are.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Benita. Virgil is correct. So as as what was mentioned prior, there's several funding pots. There's endowment, your research, extension, equity. And when I first came to Dene College, what was happening was all of that funding was sitting in different departments. So endowment was under what they called Institute for Rural Development, and then we had research was under the science faculty. Equity was also another chair. And so there was just not a lot of communication, just as Virgil was talking about in regards to, even within the college, we kind of created our own little silos with these funding mechanisms. And so when I learned more about what land grant was supposed to do, we kind of created this land grant office using endowment as our bigger pool, because these monies had to be requested every year. An RFA was put out every year, and we had to update that every year for each of our projects. And it was too tedious, and if the turnover issue is definitely, it was a situation and continues to be, because once a PI leaves, you know, we don't know who's gonna be responsible for running that particular research project or that extension project, and it was really figuring out who's gonna build onto those capacities. And so, as Virgil mentioned, each college, tribal college, is very different. We run from maybe 300 student population to 1,800 student population across the 37 tribal colleges. So each administrative responsibilities within the institution is different. There's several tribal colleges where the science faculty is the vice president of the college. You know, those type of things, because it's that small. So the person running a particular project is just spread out so thin, just as Virgil mentioned. You could be an administrator, a faculty, and also carrying a project. And so what we have done, I think what works for us at Dene is we created this land grant office, which kind of pools these funding. And what I do is I reach out to the different departments and say, what are some of the projects that we want to work on? And how can we integrate some of the academics into these projects? So if we had a research project on sheep and we don't have an agricultural program, but we can definitely put monitoring and assessment piece of their lab into that particular research project. And so trying to integrate, I guess, both extension, research, and academia, and ensuring that there's student experiential learning involved. And so it takes that one person that's going to communicate that particular process. And that's what, as Virgil was saying, if that one person leaves, you know, within a year, that program will fail. And so that's kind of the situation a lot of us are in, is the programs that we built, stepping away from it so hard because your program affects a lot of people. At Dene, we run anywhere from 22 student interns per summer. And so to think about all the opportunities that, you know, that we would have to give up if something like that would fall through. Correct. And so definitely it is a challenge at a tribal college. We definitely need more partnerships. I owe a lot to partnerships, just as any one of the other extension folks or TCU faculties, is that we don't have the capacity to run research, effective research. Our faculty members are already overloaded on teaching, their teaching load, and so they're even told not to participate in research projects because it's taking their time away from their teaching. And so that's where finding other folks that can really bring in the research aspect and connecting our students to those type of experiences is important.
Thank you, Benita. Another comment from the crowd?
One more question. So I have people experiment with bringing research projects into the classroom. I mean, it's hard, it's more work as an instructor, but I've done that both here at UNR and where I'm currently at Ohio, is to bring the project as experiential learning in the classroom and sort of allocate students to do more project-based kind of application. I mean, it's easier in graduate programs than undergraduates because they have more skills that they can bring to it. But I mean, what are the barriers to that, to really merging the two together a little bit closer?
With my projects, they're multi-year, and I have a hard time working multi-year projects into a student, say a 60 or 90-day experience, where they get something meaningful out of it, where they actually get some data they can do something with. Now, if I have time to set up a special experiment for them, and I'll admit it's something I want to add to the research we're doing, I can get distracted really easily with 5 different undergrads who want to do a variety of different things, and pretty soon I'm being an instructor. And I have to guard against that because it's taking me away from my extension and my research duties. So we need to have a better interaction with the instructors. That's their role. I mean, that's their role to teach their students how to develop a research question, what a hypothesis is, and how to do a methods section. I don't have time to really do that if I'm dealing with 5 or 10 students. They'd love for me to take that on, and I just don't have the time to do that.
So is there a model that's worked for anybody, where they've actually incorporated it, where it seems to? I mean, is it really personality based, where you get that instructor off the lyrics for at it, or is there something that's structural?
Is there a model that's worked, was the question.
Not my model.
We take a lot of pride in the fact that we spend a lot of time with our students out in the field or in the lab doing learning that way rather than learning through lecture. And we can do that because we have small numbers of students, and so it's one advantage we have maybe over Michigan State or some other big university. But so we take them out in the field all the time. We're just going back and forth all the time. And now we don't do particularly big project types of things that go for a long period of time, but certainly getting them into the lab, and they just love the work in the lab too, so that's a good thing. And getting them out in the field, and so when we're doing standard deviation, we take them out in the field and they collect samples and measure them, and then they do standard deviations and other kinds of statistics. So we are doing that at least.
Erin is going to have to sign off. Oh, she just did.
I'm still here. I just turned my video off.
Oh, good. Do you want to say what you just typed to me?
Yeah, if you want to contact me, my email is erin.riley@nifa.usda.gov. I'm sorry, I have to go over to the Office of the Secretary, so I've got to go.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you for being with us. Suzanne, I want to shift to one of your projects, the weather station project, and that's an interesting sort of take on sustainability because it's bringing instrumentation and some training to communities. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit more about what sort of training opportunities are part of that project, and how that's integrating in K through 16 or the schools and in colleges as part of that project.
Sure. The project itself will be placing up to 30 weather stations on tribal lands across the U.S. And all this data, if you go to the website, the link on the end of my presentation, you will be able to access the data from all the units, all the scan units, all the T-scan units, back from the beginning when it was installed. So it's hourly data, and the data has been proved in the scientific grade. So individuals can extract that information and use it for a number of curriculum development, which we're looking into. When I was in Virginia, it's Monkey Land, there were a number of tribes, and there were 2 individuals from the Eastern Band of Cherokee that were very interested in working with us for curriculum development. They'll be receiving a unit as well. I think they're going to try and install theirs this year. And also working with Cornell and their Northeast Regional Climate Center, that online development tool will provide a great deal of information and foundation for research. And the STEM portion of it is focusing on the youth and getting them engaged with agriculture, as well as questioning, looking at the trends, being able to overlay the different parameters and graphing them, going back in time and looking at a given event. And I would like to tie in information and viewpoints of the elders as they're walking around their land. They're noting a lot more parameters than these units measure. And so intuitively, they're looking at things and reading the signs and predicting when it's a good time to harvest, when it's a good time to plant. I'd like to marry the traditional knowledge with the data that we can look at and show the kids the integration of these tools.
So I don't have the map in front of me, but one of our audience members asked through Slido whether there are any current T-Scan collaborations in Nevada or the Great Basin, and as an extension to that, how do tribes and colleges get involved?
How do tribes get involved with the T-Scan project?
Yes.
So if you're interested in just to learn about the project, you can reach out through directly to me. And if your tribe or nation is interested in acquiring one of these units, right now, because we're partnering with the BIA, the pool with which the individuals can apply is with the federally recognized tribe. And so we would recommend that the tribe reach out to Barry Hamilton, and his contact information is also on my slide, and indicate their interest in the project. I know that we've had a large number of them already allocated, but it wouldn't hurt to reach out to him to let them know that that your nation or tribe is interested in getting a station.
Thank you, Suzanne. I did have another question, just coming off of your project. How did you decide what data would be of interest to communities? You mentioned growing degree days, heat stress, water deficit. What did you go? Are these tailored to particular communities, or are you just trying to be general in your in the tool, the dashboard tool that y'all are developing?
Well, when we started working with Cornell, we wanted to start with some foundational tools that would be applicable across the board, all across the U.S. And we wanted to try and avoid regional specific tools, just because we wanted to start the tool development with a foundational set. And then with that, those are the groups that I wanted to develop a discussion with, is the agricultural, tribal agricultural producers. And it doesn't, and that group does not necessarily, is restricted to individuals with the station. It's anybody that wants to be a part of that discussion, that there'll be facilitated discussions about the potential of advanced tools. One of the specific tool I'm looking at is wild rice. Is what could we design that would help wild rice growers? So the reason we started with these is because these tools are easily applicable across the U.S. without having to regionalize different parameters. In the growing degree days, it's just based on temperature, and a given species or crop, such as corn, goes off of the growing degree days, and again, that data is applicable across the U.S.
Great, thank you. Shifting, yeah, Virgil.
Where were you going to shift to? I had to
No,
shift.
you go. You should.
Part of the scope of this workshop was addressing needs and issues of all tribal communities, and most tribal communities do not have a tribal college, and most don't have a FERTEP agent that can serve as their spokesman into the university. So I do work with other tribes. I work with the Colvilles, the Nez Perce, the Spokanes. I would say I work with them. I'm communicating with them on some of the results we're doing, and it relates to some of their issues related to their native fish and their invasive fish issues. But how's that working with groups who don't have that contact? I heard something that Carletta, she initiated some of her early work working with another tribe, with the Pyramids, I believe. And I think that's really important that we figure out how that works or doesn't work. Do people out there feel they have access to their 1862 school? Is the 1862 being responsive? And I know at times they are, but how do we enhance that? And is there a role that a tribal college could provide? For example, we do satellite campuses. We have satellite campuses out in Washington. We don't do research with them, but we do exchange educational services with them. Does anybody have any comments on that?